Welcome to the Lessons from Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Brian Beckham. My next show is a guest appearance I did on a Jiu-Jitsu podcast called Elbows Tight. Elbows Tight is an awesome show. It has a lot of great advice for people who are interested in martial arts, interested in starting Jiu-Jitsu. If you want to know what it's like, a lot of people are intimidated. Heck, I know I was super intimidated when I first started Jiu-Jitsu. And Elbows Tight really helps explain that jujitsu shouldn't be intimidating. In fact, it will be one of the funnest things you ever do in your life. In this episode, I talk about my jujitsu journey, why I got into it, why I'm so passionate about it. I talk about a $45 million verdict that was rendered in a case against a jujitsu gym for a young man that got paralyzed doing jujitsu. Total freak accident. I talk about the situation behind that, how gym owners, not just gym owners, but any gym owners can protect themselves from liability. And I talk about the philosophy behind martial arts and why I think it's so important that people have martial arts training. I hope you enjoy the show. And I give you my views on jujitsu in the Elbows Tight podcast.
Brian, how's it going today, man? How you doing?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Thanks for asking. This is the first day, by the way. It's a jiu-jitsu podcast, so I need to say this. I've trained 6 days in a row, and this is my off day, so I'm resting today.
I don't know how you do it. I do 3 days a week, and I'm like broken.
Yeah.
I'm like sitting there thinking, like, how am I going to get through the rest of my week with how much my body's already beat up? How do you do 6 days a week?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you asked that question. So when I started, I was 47 years old, and I was kind of in shape and kind of not in shape. I mean, I was in shape in certain areas and not in others, but I can tell you where I wasn't in shape, and that was grappling, because I'd never grappled before. And as you know, and all your audience knows, there's a lot of very specific movements and movement patterns with your body that my body had just never done before. So when I first started out, it was 2 or 3 days of beginners classes a week at most, and I would get home and I would be so sore, not injured, pardon me, not injured, but just really, really sore. And it took a little while, but I remember thinking I'm going to do a little experiment on myself, and that is if I do it a lot, if I continue to do it, now obviously don't train through injury, but soreness is a different thing. If I can push through the soreness, is there something better on the other side? And what I found was that two things. Your body gets adjusted to the movements after a while, and you get better at jiu-jitsu after a while. So the better you are at jiu-jitsu, the less chance you have of getting hurt. Plus, I also learned maybe one of the most important jiu-jitsu lessons I've ever learned, and that's pick your training partners carefully.
Right.
So,
especially at 47 years old. That's a little bit later in life than most people started. What made you want to do it? What was the final deciding factor for you to jump into it finally?
Yeah, so I've been a fight fan my whole life. My brother and I actually, when we were in college, I remember watching the very first UFC, and it was in I want to say 1993 or 1994, but it was illegal in 49 states. It was illegal in one state, and you had to buy a tape that you popped into a device called a VCR, which most people probably don't know about anyway. But you'd buy it online, or you'd order it through the mail, and they'd send you this tape, and you'd pop it in there, and you'd watch the UFC. And I remember watching. My brother and I liked to box when we grew up. We did some taekwondo and stuff like that. But we saw this Hoist Gracie kid, and we were like, holy bleep, this is the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in my life. And then I didn't do anything about it for almost 30 years. And I've been thinking about, if you're in that ecosystem where you listen to Jocko Willink and Joe Rogan and all those meatheads, then you hear a lot about jiu-jitsu. And I've been thinking about starting jiu-jitsu for a long time. Make a very long story or a short story a little longer than it should be. I hired a lawyer who was a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and that kind of pushed me over the edge. I talked to him about it. I said, I'm going to give it a shot. I literally Googled jiu-jitsu near me, and the best gym in Texas happens to be 5 minutes from my house. So I got really lucky as far as that goes. And so that's kind of how I started. Just, I've been interested in martial arts and fighting for a very, very long time, and hired a lawyer who was a purple belt, and off we go.
So, when you were working with this lawyer that was a purple belt, was there times where it was just like you're just getting lost in the weeds on like your curiosity in jiu-jitsu, or was it kind of like you were working and they're like, oh, by the way, and you would ask them a question about it? Like, how did that whole conversation go?
Yeah, it's so funny you'd ask that. So I have an addictive personality, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's bad. So I'm addicted to exercise, for instance, which I think is good in general. Although sometimes I exercise a little bit too much. But yeah, no. As soon as I got into jiu-jitsu, it was a full-blown addiction. Still is today. I mean, we text, you know. We work together. His name is Brendan Fradkin, and we try cases together and work on cases together. He's a phenomenal guy, and we use jiu-jitsu metaphors when we're working on cases all the time. We're like, we're going to tap out the insurance company, you know, we're going to put them in a rear naked choke. And so, and you know, being somebody who's super, super curious and also has that addictive behavior, I mean, I've watched so many YouTube videos. I've watched every single Hodger Gracie TV short you can watch. I've sponsored jiu-jitsu tournaments. I think about jiu-jitsu when I'm not doing it. I have my jiu-jitsu friends over for the UFC. I mean, it literally is a full-blown addiction, and I'm frankly I'm proud that it is. I'm happy to be doing this at 50. So. But yeah, we talk about it. You know, I'll literally tell Brendan, I'll be like, we'll be talking about a case or something, and I'll be like, jiu-jitsu metaphor incoming, prepare yourself, and and then we'll hit each other with a cool jiu-jitsu metaphor. So yeah, it's an obsession.
So your day job is you are a trial lawyer. How did you get into that, to give a little bit of backstory and personality of yourself?
Yeah, so I studied computer science and philosophy in college, and I tell people I spent 4 years behind a computer screen with a bunch of geeks, and I didn't want to do that my whole life. So I went to law school, and what do I do now, 25 years later? Sit behind a computer screen with a bunch of geeks. So I went to law school basically for two reasons. One reason was my mother died when I was 10 as a result of some very, very, very serious negligence, and my dad hired a lawyer. I didn't know about this because I was too young. It was many years later that I found out about it. But my dad hired a lawyer to represent my family and won against the United States government, which is a hard thing to do. So if you Google Beckham versus the United States, you will see that case. Like, the case will pull up on Google, and you can read all about it. And
wow,
I read about it when I was in my 20s in law school. I read the case for the first time. Didn't even know it existed until I was in law school. And that kind of motivated me to do what I did. And the other thing is, when I was in college, I was in a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week military organization called the Corps Cadets, kind of like a military academy. And at the end of my senior year, I was in a leadership position, and I got to help a lot of kids that were in trouble for hazing or academic misconduct or stuff like that, and I got a huge kick out of helping people. So it was the combination of what happened with my mother, and also I really enjoyed helping people that were in difficult situations. That's kind of how I ended up at law school. So people are like, how does a computer science and a philosophy guy end up at law school? Well, there's your answer.
Yeah, we interviewed one of our friends. His name's David, and he went to school to be a physical therapist. He's a doctor of physical therapy, but through jiu-jitsu and natural medicine, he realized he wants to help people in other ways. So it's interesting how I went to college, but it was just this last year not these last couple of years through the pandemic. I had two babies going through college, and it was like 100% remote and with a full-time job and stuff like that. And I definitely couldn't have done that if I was any younger than in my 30s. You know what I mean? Like, because I was just so focused. But it's interesting when people, like yourself, you go for these. I don't know, being a lawyer is crazy to me, the amount of stuff you guys have to go through and the bar exam and stuff like that. It's so cool that you're no, I really want to help people. And then you found the means and the passion within being a lawyer to do that. How is your passion for jiu-jitsu and your passion for helping people as a trial lawyer? How have they combined?
Yeah. it's been, so there's a lot of things that have happened in jiu-jitsu that I would have never been able to predict in a million years. You could have given me a million years and I would not have guessed some of the things that would have happened. So here's one really cool thing that happened. I'm 6 months into my training, and a guy at our gym named Pedro Marino posts something on social media that he's looking for sponsors. And I had trained with Pedro, and a lot of your listeners are going to know exactly who Pedro is. I had trained with him privately a couple times, and he is an absolutely phenomenal guy. He is just a beautiful human being, and I just liked him a lot. And so he posted this thing on social media. I said, "Hey, Pedro, I'd love to sponsor you. My law firm will sponsor you." And he almost started crying. He was so happy. And so that has created, like, now I sponsor 3 fighters. So I sponsor Pedro Marino. I sponsor Enrico Camargo, who's the #1 guy in his weight division right now. And I sponsor another, I say kid, 25-year-old guy named Bruno Matias. So I've I've got this stable of young kids that are doing awesome things, and I get to be a part of it, and it's so much fun. I've also, like, I've put on 2 jiu-jitsu tournaments. I've sponsored 2 jiu-jitsu tournaments. I represent and provide legal advice for free all the time to my jiu-jitsu buddies, most of which has to do with stuff that I don't really do on my day job, immigration stuff, maybe some criminal stuff here and there, real estate stuff. And then if somebody does have something that fits in my practice area, somebody's been hurt, injured, killed, I know somebody's been hurt, injured, or killed, then I represent a lot of jiu-jitsu people as far as that goes. Matter of fact, I've got a little ad slogan for my law firm: "We fight for fighters." And it's really cool because there's not everybody in jiu-jitsu there's some assholes in jiu-jitsu, but most people that do jiu-jitsu are just, at least in my experience, they're just great people. They're just special people. And again, not everybody, but most people. So it's been a real joy. I've got a skill set that's valuable to people. Like my legal skills are helpful to a lot of people, and being able to help my friends and teammates in the jiu-jitsu community that's just extremely rewarding for me.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I wish I had a lawyer in my in my school. I'd be like, we have like, like some entrepreneurs and stuff like that. I'm always asking them like business advice, but it'd be pretty cool to have a, like a trial lawyer in there. Be like, "Hey man, by the way, my wife is sent to collection." Yeah,
you got one
now.
You got one now. Yeah, you're talking to him. Yeah,
yeah. I'll definitely be hitting you up on Instagram or texting you later, Brian. I got a question.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the other thing, I have to mail you some swag, because one of the cool things about jiu-jitsu is everybody's constantly got swag, right? So I'm wearing some swag from my law firm. You're wearing some jiu-jitsu swag. I've got hats, hoodies, everything, VB attorneys. But what'll happen is Opiana Malacheas is the head of our gym, Gracie Baja West Chase in Houston. Also, he just opened a place in River Oaks, which is absolutely stunningly beautiful. So if anybody's in Houston looking to train, Opiana's got 2 gyms now, both of which are fantastic. Nice. But he has all this swag, and so he'll come out with a black hoodie, and then 2 weeks later, a black VB hoodie will hit the market. And so, like, we compete to see who can have the most swag. But anyway, all the jiu-jitsu guys are walking around wearing VB attorney stuff. And all the attorneys in my firm are walking around wearing jiu-jitsu stuff. So it's like a win-win thing. Yeah, it's a win-win thing for sure. But make sure I got to get your address, because I got a whole box of swag I want to send you.
Oh, dude, absolutely, yeah, for sure. We'll definitely do that right after this, and I got to get your address too. So, but you go to a Gracie Baja Academy, right? You guys are affiliated with Gracie Baja.
Yeah.
How do you feel? I have a couple friends that I talk to online on like Instagram that are Gracie Baja, and how do you feel about like the uniformity of the academy? Do you feel like having everyone in the same gi, same rash guard? Do you feel like there's anything that it does for the community, like that you've noticed?
Yeah. So, and before I say anything, if I may offend a couple people with some of the answers I give today, and here's the bottom line: I don't give a shit. Okay, sorry, this is the way I feel, and if you're offended, then man up a little bit, toughen up. But
I think our listener rate's going to go up after this comment.
yeah. So anyway, this may offend some people, but I don't care. The way I feel about it, and it's because I think it has to do with my upbringing. So my father was in the military. My mother was in the military. My older brother was a Marine. My father flew 200 combat missions over Vietnam. His dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. My uncle, chief master sergeant. Plus I was in the Corps Cadet. So I have this military upbringing. It's very deep in my bones. And one time I asked Golpiano, I said, why do we have to wear all the same stuff? And he said, because when we're doing videos and taking pictures and stuff, it looks like crap. If everybody's wearing yellow banana gis, and I understand people like want to have some fun with it and all that stuff, and I got no problem with that at all. But some people just like I'm sorry, people look like complete idiots. Like my wife will walk past, and I'll be watching a YouTube video, and some guy's wearing some weird ass looking no-gi banana with feathers on it, and it's like, okay, that looks awesome and funny and all that stuff, but people that don't know about jiu-jitsu are going to think you look like a complete idiot. Whereas when we're all wearing basically the same stuff, I just think it aesthetically just looks so much better. I don't really think it, and again, this is my opinion. I'm a purple belt, so take it for what it's worth. Like maybe black belts and people that have been doing this a lot longer than I have will have a lot more to say about it, but I don't know that it has much at all to do with the substantive jiu-jitsu. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of a feeling of a little more of a team feeling, maybe a little bit of that. But for me, the big part of it is it just looks better. Like you just look sharper when one guy's wearing, instead of one guy wearing a black and one guy wearing orange and one guy wearing red and one guy looks like a chicken and one guy looks like a turtle and
there's camouflage.
What is this, a fucking costume party? I mean, we're training jiu-jitsu, right? So, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, Gracie Baja, Mac Dojo, and oh, you too strict on the uniforms and all that stuff. But, hey, you want to look like an idiot, go ahead. I like looking sharp. And I think our uniforms look sharp as shit. So that's kind of my view on that.
Yeah, we go to an academy where we have, like, academy gis. And, like, obviously we have, like, team gear, rash guard, and stuff like that. But it's definitely not pressed upon people to wear it. But sometimes I don't wear it personally because I have like just my own gis. I have a little bit of a fancier one that's like a Carhartt brown. Nice. And that's like the fanciest gi in the school. And when I wear it, everyone's always like, oh, that's a nice gi. And I wouldn't be able to have that moment if we all wore everything the same. But John and I both were in the Navy. We're in the military. And so completely understand the uniformity and like the brotherhood and everything like that. And like you help each other and whatnot. And, but I don't know. Sometimes I see those, I go back and forth. Like sometimes you see that no-gi gear, you're like, man, that looks pretty sharp. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And then, there's some people out there, I'm like, what are you doing, bro? Like, what do you, or even like Spanx with like no shirt, you know what I mean? And I'm like, what are you wearing? You're like, you're grappling another grown man in your boxers. Like,
exactly. I mean, it's already, but hey, it's already got some connotations to it, like certain types of positions and stuff, and then you add some more of that to it, and it's like, really,
people just are shaking their head. They're like, "What is going on in here?"
Yeah, I will say one thing though. This is kind of weird, and this is a little bit different topic, but kind of a similar topic. I will say this: like, we're not. So when we practice in the gi, we have to wear a rash guard of some sort underneath the gi. So you can't just have the gi on with no shirt on underneath. So I had never, for as long as I've been training, I had never worn a gi without a rash guard underneath it. And I started doing some privates with a Brazilian black belt on Fridays. It would just be me and him. And he would show up and he would just have the gi with no rash guard underneath. And I was like, why do you do that? He said, I think it's more comfortable. So I started trying it during our private lessons, and I got to tell you, I agree with him. Like, when I first started, the gi was super uncomfortable, and frankly, I hated it. I thought it was too hot, too heavy. I felt like I was wearing a suit of cardboard, and I just didn't like it. I mean, I just didn't. I like gi more. Or no gi more. I thought no gi was more comfortable, more realistic, and all that. Yeah. I've changed my mind about that within the last year or so. But the point is, I started. You can't train when there are like people of their sex, women, and stuff without a rash guard underneath. But when you're doing a private lesson, you can. And I got to tell you, man, I think that is super, super comfortable. Plus, this is going to sound stupid, but I feel more Brazilian. But I feel like I can move better a little bit. It's weird. So, but anyway, I know there's a big controversy between gi and no gi. I have some opinions on that, but I like them both. Bottom line.
So let's kind of jump into that. Let's how has your opinion changed about gi to no gi in your time doing jiu-jitsu and as you mature as a practitioner?
Yeah, so the short version, the kind of bottom line version is the better I get at jiu-jitsu, the more I like the gi. And I think that's because the gi, and I think very few people would disagree with it, there's more technique in the gi. There's more things you can do. The no gi is, to me, a lot, especially in some of these rule sets, is basically a wrestling match with some jiu-jitsu mixed in. And that's fun. And I love the wrestling component of it, but I'm 50 years old, and so I don't want to go in there and do double legs all day long against Pedro Moreno. I mean, I wouldn't last 2 minutes, right? And so as an older grappler, I can slow you down and control you better when we're in the gi. Now, the flip side of that is I'm 6'1", 220, and played college basketball, so I'm a pretty good athlete. So when I'm no gi, I feel like I can... in other words, people can control me in the gi better too. Going against black belts in the gi is harder than it is in no gi because I can use my size and my quickness and my athleticism more in the no gi than I can in the gi. Like I go against Olpiano in the gi, and he's a 4-stripe black belt, OG in the jiu-jitsu community, and he will choke me from every angle you can possibly imagine. Whereas when we do no gi, I mean, he still kills me. It just takes a little longer, you know. So I actually, and you know, in terms of like, people normally frame it in terms of what's more realistic in a fight, gi or no gi. And you know, there's different viewpoints on that. It depends on whether you're in a cold area where people wearing jackets, or you're on the beach and blah blah blah. I don't really look at it that much from that perspective as a lot of people. The perspective I look at it from is more about technique, and also, especially again as a little bit older grappler, I'm 50 years old. I think it's a little safer to be in the gi. Mm-hmm. I think that in addition to being able to slow people down and control them a little bit, there's more cushioning, there's less wrestling. So I strongly recommend that older grapplers, more mature grapplers, at least start in the gi. I just think it's a little bit safer for them.
Yeah, I agree. John says the same thing. He likes the gi more because it gives him the opportunity. He's 45, and it gives him the opportunity to kind of, you know, grab something and equalize a little bit better with the younger, more athletic people. You know, because there's a grip everywhere. It's like if it's in arm's reach or legs reach, I'm grabbing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know, of course, one problem is, and I find like lately I've been doing a lot of sleeve-based guards, lasso guards, spider guards, stuff like that. And the second you go over to the no-gi, you're trying to do guards that are
you're like
you cannot do. Yeah, you're like, how do I lasso in the no-gi? Yeah, so or like I'll try, like I've been doing this back take off of top side control that works great in the gi because I can grip the back of the collar in such a way that I can get to the back pretty quickly. In the no-gi, you got to like, basically in order for that move, the grip has got to kind of go on the shoulder blade, which, you know, 3 minutes in is slick as you know what, and you can't hold on to it. And so you do have to redesign your game a little bit in the no-gi as far as that goes, especially if you do a lot of gi, because the grips in gi are everything. I mean, they are just absolutely fundamental. So you really start, like I really dial in my grips and my positioning of my grips in the gi. And then none of that. I mean, some of it applies. I mean, there's, no-gi grips and stuff like that, but it's just a different game, basically.
Did you feel that because you are 6'1", 220, that jiu-jitsu was a little bit easier for you when you first started? Because that's a very advantageous body style for jiu-jitsu in a lot of ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I've got long legs, so I can triangle the shit out of anybody. But and so yeah, but we've got a black belt, world champion, 52-year-old black belt in our gym. His name is Frank, who's 6'8". 260. So
holy crap!
I don't care how big you are. There's always somebody bigger. But I tell you, so there's no doubt. So here are my disadvantages. My disadvantages is I'm 50. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, that is literally my only disadvantage. Mentally, there's not anybody in that gym that's any tougher than I am. I don't care, and that applies to any gym I walk into. Physically, I'm still a good athlete at 50, and I'm big and I'm fast. Here's the downside. So yes, that's all super advantageous, and I've actually gotten to the point now where I'm really working on pressure taps and smother taps and stuff like that.
Mother milk.
And mother's milk. Yeah, exactly. And if you weigh 220 and you know how to put pressure on people, you can pressure tap them. But the downside is, when the 6'5", 250-pound former Division I college wrestler or the 6'11", 260-pound European basketball player walks into our gym, who do they pair him up with? They pair him up with me, the bigger guy. Yeah. So it's not like I'm going against people all the time that are 50 pounds lighter than me. I'm going against guys that are 50 pounds heavier than me. And I tell you what, man, that can be quite a challenge. So there's pluses and minuses to being my size. The other thing about having long legs is they make a very tasty target for your training partners. It's harder to hide my legs because they're kind of all over the place. But anyway.
Yeah, Cody, our school owner, he's a brown belt. He's 6'5", 220, 230. Yeah. And watching him do like anything like X guard or single leg X or anything where he has to wrap his legs around people besides like a triangle or something like that. He even admits it. He's like, I don't play a lot of closed guard because there's a lot of space. My legs are so long. It just it's not as good as if like I'm 5'8", 210. Like my closed guard is a little bit tighter than his. I mean, granted, relative, but it's just But when I roll with him, to your point, when he puts pressure on me, I don't really tap to pressure anymore. But there's moments where I'm like, "Why do you hate me? Like what?"
Well, and
that was the biggest thing that.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, like, just take an example. Let's take a couple guards. So De La Hiva guard. I can actually get my De La Hiva hook all the way past your opposite leg. You know what I mean? Which is a real advantage, and I can do some damage with that De La Hiva hook. Switch it over to a butterfly type guard, and it's hard for me to get my legs in tight and get my butterfly hooks up under you. The famous Marcelo Garcia butterfly sweep. It's hard to get my legs in like that. Whereas a guy with shorter legs, he can get those butterfly hooks in from anywhere, and so, and that's one of the things I like about jiu-jitsu. Every single time I think, well, there's nothing I can do about this, turns out there's a solution to it. I mean, every time there's a solution to it. The other thing I found, by the way, along those lines is every time I'm doing something and it seems like it's too hard, that always means I'm doing it wrong. Like
preach.
There's a more efficient way to do it, right? Like, too much effort is a signal that you're screwing up. So, anyway. Yeah.
So, as a you have your own law firm, I'm sure you interact with a lot of people that don't do jiu-jitsu. Is there any times that you kind of have to decline, or how can I not decline, but what are some common misconceptions that you have to tell people when you tell them that you do jiu-jitsu? Like, do they automatically think like you're an aggressive person? Like you can't, you know what I mean? Like, is there any misconceptions that come along with being a practitioner in your line of field?
I think there's maybe some misconceptions, and so I have a lot of people that I post a lot of story content on Instagram, like different roles and stuff and videos. Opiana calls me the video king, and I post stuff mainly of good moves I've made, but I also post videos of me getting submitted and things like that. And I think so. So a lot of the point is a lot of people, especially people that are in their 40s like me, or maybe even their 50s, they're seeing this. And there's a lot of people my age, including my best friend, who I'm real happy to say I convinced him to take up jiu-jitsu, and he's totally addicted to it as well. So I got a lot of friends that have kind of followed my lead into jiu-jitsu. And I've got a friend right now who wants to go to this River Oaks gym that Olpiano opened up, which again it looks like an Apple store. It's so nice.
Wow.
But I think he's nervous because I think he thinks, like a lot of people like I thought before I walked into the gym. I mean, you got to keep in mind, I walked into this gym and I didn't know a single person, nobody. It wasn't like I walked in with a friend. I just walked in, and there's these people. There's plenty of nerds there, but there are people there that look like absolute killers, like killers. I mean, Olpiano is an intimidating looking guy. I didn't even want to look him in the eyes for the first month of training, but I was super intimidated because I thought it was a bunch of meatheads beating the shit out of each other. Pardon my language, but and I think that's what a lot of people think. I think a lot of people think that jiu-jitsu is about going in there and beating people up and being tough and all that stuff. And that's the misconception that I think is hardest to overcome, especially with older people. So, like, all the time, what was I doing when I was 47 years old trying to decide whether to start jiu-jitsu at that age? I was Googling, is 47 too old to start jiu-jitsu?
Is it too late?
Like, is it too late? And every single article says, of course not. It's not too late. I think you can practice jiu-jitsu in your 60s and 70s if you do it the right way. But that message doesn't really get out there as much as I think it should. I mean, it's a young man's sport. The famous people, the Gordon Rhines and all those Panicki Rods, all those people are young people. And us, quote, I don't like to say I'm old because I don't like to put those thoughts in my mind. I don't feel that old. And frankly, I can kick the shit out of most 40-year-olds. So I'm physically, I'm not that old. But anyway, the more mature grapplers.
I like that. More mature grapplers. Yeah.
They need to have a different kind of way of looking at what it is we're doing. And like yesterday, I rolled 4 or 5 rolls, and I was sitting there talking to a black belt I rolled with, who's my age, a great guy. And we're sitting out a roll watching everybody, and I'm like, this is the most complete type of exercise anybody can do. I think you get stretching, you get strength, you get cardio, you get the team, you get the competitiveness. I was like, I literally can't think of another sport where you get all of that. And that kind of pitch, right? Pitching to people in their 50s like me that are starting to feel, I need to kind of capture some of that youth back. Go do jiu-jitsu, but don't look at it as going in there and getting in a fight every time. I mean, I remember Olpiano, we were doing a private lesson 6 months in or so, and he says, all you guys think this is fighting. You think you're coming in here and fighting when you start out. And it's not until you realize you're doing jiu-jitsu, and there is a difference, that you actually start getting better. And so I think in terms of like people that are my age, getting more people my age to participate in jiu-jitsu is good for jiu-jitsu for a lot of reasons. People my age have money. Everybody in jiu-jitsu is freaking broke, it seems like. So, bringing sponsorship money, bringing, tournaments. I mean, we need more people that are older doing jiu-jitsu. I think it's just good for the sport, but we got to make sure we pitch it in the right way and overcome a lot of the fears. I mean, I was scared to death. I'm not afraid to admit it when I first started doing jiu-jitsu. I mean, I was afraid. Like, I didn't know am I going to get my arm broken? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of overcome that. And a lot of people just won't even make the effort to overcome that. And so we need to have a better message, I think, for people and for women too, for that matter. I think, my daughter's done jiu-jitsu with me. I cannot get my wife to do it yet, but we'll see.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I'm trying. I'm still trying. We've been doing it for about 5 years now, and I'm always like, babe, just come to jiu-jitsu. Babe, come
Me
to
too.
jiu-jitsu.
Me too.
And she's not into it yet.
All three of my kids have done it. Both my boys and my daughter has done it just for self-defense purposes. But I think, like, if you have a teenage daughter and you don't teach her a little self-defense, you're not doing your job as a parent. Like, that's part of being a dad, is teaching your kids a little bit of self-defense, and real self-defense, not, the Steven Seagal nonsense you see on video where he's like throwing people with his brainwaves and stuff.
Yeah, you're not gonna channel your inner chi and knock these people down. They're definitely gonna still come right at you. So.
Exactly.
But you mentioned in there that you physically feel younger. And for the most part, what kind of training do you do outside of jiu-jitsu, mentally and physically? Because I know you're big into like leadership, spirituality, and all that stuff. Like, what kind of mental and physical training do you do also?
Yeah, so I have a routine that I've kind of developed that's helped me stay in pretty good shape. So I lift weights. I only do that 2 or 3 times a week. The main reason I'm not lifting weights so I look good on the beach. I'm lifting weights to strengthen the muscles and the tendons and ligaments that I use in jiu-jitsu. So it's a lot of shoulder, a lot of core work, glute work. So when you're, bridging and pushing people and stuff like that. But probably the biggest kind of recovery thing that I've started doing in the past couple of years is I bought a plunge pool and a infrared sauna for my house. And so
I'm jealous.
My routine, I'm telling you, man, it's a game changer. My routine, and so I train at lunch, and what I do before every lunch class is I sit in my sauna for 15 minutes and I meditate. There's my mental training. Plus I get my body kind of loose, and then when I'm done, I go and jump in the plunge pool for a minute or two, pop out, go train. As soon as I'm done training, I get back and I lift weights. I don't lift weights for that long, 15, 20 minutes, just enough to kind of, keep the muscles that I need to do jiu-jitsu. And then every evening after dinner, I do 25 minutes in the sauna and another 2 minutes in the plunge pool. The sauna and the plunge pool combination, I don't know if I'm going to live any longer. I don't know if it's good for having heart attacks or cancer or what, but I tell you one thing I know for sure. It sure makes me feel good. It makes me feel really, really good. And I was originally going and paying $30 for a 30-minute sauna, 20 minutes across town, and I got so addicted to it. My wife was like, we just need to buy one of these things. But for people that are thinking about options for recovery, that infrared sauna is I've been telling everybody this, it is a game changer. Highly, highly recommend.
Yeah, you can find them on Amazon too. I've been looking at them on Amazon, and you can get $100, $200, like a little thing that wraps around you, and you just sit there, and it's got the red lights in it and infrared lights and whatnot. I've been looking at doing that too. And if you don't have a tub or a cold plunge or whatever, you can also take cold showers. Andrew Huberman, I don't know if you listen to him. He talks about even like a 5-minute cold shower. He's like the whole idea behind it is just getting cold. Because the mental training that it takes to get cold is incredible also. You know what I mean? And I think that's the big thing with jiu-jitsu is like we're constantly putting ourselves through adversity. You know what I mean? Like we're every class, either we're tired, we can't figure something out, or there's just so much problem solving. And as a leader, I'm sure that's helped you out quite a bit. How has jiu-jitsu helped your philosophy and leadership as you approach your day job and as a parent too?
Countless ways. Too many to mention. I'll try to think of 2 or 3 big ones. So here's one, and this is really, really a big deal to me. My oldest son went to college this year, and he was trying to decide whether to join a fraternity or whether to join the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M and be the fourth generation of Beckham men to do that. And I had just started jiu-jitsu about a year and a half before that, and I was really encouraging him to choose the manly route, which was the Corps of Cadets. And he did. And I think the reason he did it is because he saw his dad out there scrapping with 25-year-old Brazilian black belts. And so when I said that to him, I had more credibility than if I was some overweight, out of shape, drunk, lazy dad. Like, jiu-jitsu has given me moral authority because for people that have kids that are listening, they know this. Kids do not care what you say; they care what you do. And if your kids seeing you out there doing hard things, working, being tough mentally, then they're going to listen to what you say a lot more, and they're going to be like that themselves. So that's one way. The other way is, if I'm rolling with 6'8", 270-pound world champion black belt Frank, and I'm underneath him, and and I'm inverted, and he's smashing the hell out of me, and I can't move or breathe. I mean, you think some nitwit, pencil-necked insurance adjuster is going to intimidate me? Of course not. Like, I walk out of that jiu-jitsu gym with a level of personal self-confidence that translates into everything else I do in my business. And the third thing is, I don't know if some of your listeners may have had this experience, but I certainly did. When I started doing jiu-jitsu, early on, I'd be walking down, in the park, or I'd be at one of my kids' sports games, and I'd be scoping out all these dads, and I'd be like, man, I could beat the crap out of that.
Yeah, that's such
I think for that guy, I would do an arm bar. For that guy, I would single leg him, and then I would get on top of him and choke him. And so I was like thinking about this all the time, and like just waiting for somebody to try something on me. But then after a little while, it kind of gave me this. Maybe the best word is calmness. Like when I'm around a group of people, when I'm in a group of people. Most people don't know what would happen if things went south because they just don't know. They have no idea. I know what would happen. Like, I know, generally speaking, what would happen. And it gives you a level of kind of poise and a level of calmness that, I mean, if you can defend yourself, you don't have to act like an idiot, right?
Yeah.
The guys that are yapping at the bars and making the most noise, those are the biggest sissies in the world because they're trying to prove something. It's the calm jiu-jitsu guy or the calm Muay Thai guy standing over there. Those are the guys I tell my boys all the time. I'm like, the guys you got to watch out for are the guys that don't say anything. The guy that's jacking his mouth all the time is not somebody you need to worry about that much. It's his buddy sitting over there looking at you quietly and not saying anything.
Yeah.
That's the guy you got to be careful about, right?
Yeah, I completely agree, man. I definitely think there's a reason why, a lot of white belts will go to like house parties or parties with their friends and be showing the power of jiu-jitsu. But I'm at the stage now, like you mentioned, where if someone wants to, pipe up or whatever, it doesn't bother me any. Jocko always talks about it. He's like, the first thing you should do in self-defense is get away, right?
Get
like,
away.
I already know, like, I don't even care. Like, you can say whatever you want, do whatever you want, just don't touch me. Like, nothing you can say or do is going to mean anything to me. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
right.
I won't give you that power. You know what I mean? And I honestly think it's from, just constantly being humbled, we're just always humbled. Like you mentioned earlier, you're 6'1", 220 athletic, you could put a hurting on someone, but there's always someone bigger and badder. There's always someone that's going to come in and show you how it can be, you know what I mean? So I think there's so much value in, as a man, as a woman, as a child, there's so much value in people experiencing that on a regular basis. And it doesn't have to necessarily be martial art. It could be at work. It could be anywhere in school, right? I think failure and being humbled is something that we need more in this world, No
doubt. No doubt. My first jiu-jitsu class, I'll never forget it. We're working on specific training on side control. I was paired up with a purple belt at the time, who's now a black belt. His name was Jake. And he's a 45-year-old bald Jewish computer scientist who weighs 160, 165 pounds, something like that. And I'm thinking, I think I can probably push this guy off of me at least. Like, I can probably shove him physically off of me. And 30 seconds later, when I tap from exhaustion, and he could have armbarred me and choked me unconscious 15 times without even trying. And I think what happens is, so what happened to me when that occurred was I was like, holy shit, I have to learn how to do that. But I think some people, they'll come into their first jiu-jitsu class, they'll get completely humbled, and they'll never come back.
Yeah.
Whereas some people will get completely humbled, and they'll be like, I needed that. Like, I needed to be humbled, and it's good for me to be humbled. I mean, it is good for me to be humbled. Sometimes I'll watch, I'll roll with Enrique, and I think he's a medium lightweight now, something like that. He's a brown belt, and he'll kill me. And then I'll watch him roll with Pedro, and Pedro makes him look like a white belt. And it's like, you just realize how there's like levels to this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And then Olpiano, who's like 46, who runs our gym, he's forgotten more about jiu-jitsu than anybody in our gym will probably ever know. And like, there are moves that it's amazing, because I'll be like, Olpiano, if we train on Friday, some of the time I'll be like, here's what was going on this week. Like, I was having trouble with this particular thing. And he'll be like, do this, this, and this. Problem solved immediately. Every single thing I ask him, he has an answer to. It's just absolutely amazing. But yeah, it teaches you. And the other thing, by the way, it teaches you, I think, is there's a lot of dangerous people walking around that don't look dangerous. And so it's a bad idea to get in a fight, period. And you just never know. Forget about weapons. I mean, weapons is one thing, but you just never know. Somebody has some training, and they're gonna embarrass you in front of your girlfriend. Like, the first thing you need to do is look at their ears. If their ears look funny, stay the hell away, right?
Yeah. Did you see that video last night? It looks like in New Orleans, Nate Diaz puts a guy to sleep with a standing guillotine in the middle of the streets. And,
Really?
they're about to get jumped. Some guy shoots in for a double on Nate, and he just, boom, guillotines him and drops him. And so I would love to get your perspective as a lawyer on the legality behind using jiu-jitsu in the streets, if possible.
100% legal.
At what point... It's 100% legal, but at what point is it taken too far, or you might run into issues? Because the guy knocked his head, he cut his head open, and he was like had a skull laceration from hitting it on the ground. As a self-defense, would I be liable for that because I put him to sleep and dropped him on his head, or like how does it work?
It all depends on how good you are at something. So, like, for instance, a black belt's going to be judged different than a white belt. A white belt that puts somebody in a guillotine, first of all, a white belt probably is not going to even know how to do that. And if they do, they're going to miss half of the details, and it's probably not going to work. But if a black belt does it, he can kill you. Like, he can legitimately kill you if he wants to. And so black belts are judged by a different standard, and they should be, because they know more. So if Nate, for instance, were to, and I haven't seen the video, but if he were to put the guy to sleep, drop him, let him fall to the ground, not a big deal. If he were to let him do that, hold the thing too long to where he like damages his vocal cords, and he was doing that on purpose, and you can see him digging the knife edge in, that's a totally different story. So it all depends on, this. It's very dependent on the circumstances. So if somebody, I'll tell you, in Texas, we actually have mutual combat rules. So you can agree in Texas, we're going to fight, and whoever wins the fight, and the police can do nothing about it. So it also depends on the state you're in. In Texas, the rules are extremely more towards the self-defense community. Like, you basically can do almost whatever you want to do to defend your property and your family, whereas other states might have different rules. But but like I said, it's going to be context dependent. I mean, if a guy is like saying, leave me alone," as you're breaking his elbow joint, I give up, snap! That's not acceptable anywhere. I don't care what the situation is. But if a guy has a gun and you grab the gun out of his hand and try to choke him unconscious, and you do it too hard and you break his neck and kill him, well, fuck him. He was trying to kill you. He had a gun. So your response to that was commensurate with the threat. Like it depends on like if the threat is that you're going to die, then you can respond with that same level of force. If the threat is just a couple college kids in a bar and you're getting in a fight and you punch each other a few times and one of your buddy comes over and stomps on his head and kills him, that's not commensurate with the threat. And so that guy, the guy that does the stomping, is going to get in trouble criminally, as he should. So it's all about kind of the circumstances and the balance. But for people that are listening, if you are legitimately defending yourself, you are free to use legitimate jiu-jitsu in any way you want. And if anybody gives any of your listeners a hard time about that, give me a call and I'll represent you.
But look at that, guys. Look, now everyone has the perks of Brian at their disposal.
Yeah.
So let's jump over to obviously the gigantic thing that just happened in the jiu-jitsu community with the $46 million lawsuit. I'm sure as someone that sues insurance companies, that you look at those insurance adjusters and you're like, bro, you better give me exactly what I want, or else I'm going to rear naked choke you. What do you make of this whole situation?
Yeah. So I want to make one comment before we talk about this, and that is I have not read the transcripts of the court proceeding. So I'm familiar with Henry Gracie's testimony. I'm familiar with the basic move that was being done and kind of what happened, but it would be irresponsible for me to comment too much without having done my own homework. But let me tell your listeners generally what we're talking about here, because I think the framing of this has gotten a little sideways, okay? What is really happening behind the scenes in any lawsuit like this? Here's what's happening, okay? That gym will never pay a penny. Never. They will never pay one penny, okay? They are in no financial risk at all, okay? The insurance company that they have paid premiums to for however many years they paid premiums to, that took their money, when it was time to protect that gym, let them down. Anybody that wants to get mad about this case needs to be mad at the insurance company, because they were the ones that chose not to settle. They were the ones that chose not to pay this paralyzed person a fair settlement. And they could have. And so people think like, oh, Henry Gracie was an expert witness. And I got some questions about his role in that. Based on what I've seen and heard, it seems to me like some of the things he said about separating white belts and upper belts, that's just not the case in any jiu-jitsu gym I've ever been to. So, matter of fact, the black belts and the white belts training together is a great thing because you get better and all that stuff. So I have some questions about some of his testimony. But at the end of the day, people need to understand, especially jiu-jitsu gym owners, buy your insurance, pay your premiums, and make sure your insurance company takes care of you, because that is what you are paying them to do. And so the real anger that I have about this case is the fact that and by the way, for people that don't know, the insurance companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars in propaganda campaigns to convince people that there's something wrong with lawsuits. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because they make more money. And they have insurance companies have special rules. Like, I'm not allowed as a lawyer in court to tell you as a juror that this person has a $10 million insurance policy. I can't even say the word. I can't even talk about insurance, okay? Why? Because the insurance companies know if I did, the jury would be like, okay, well, it's an insurance company. You guys need to pay this. And so the deck is completely stacked in the insurance company's favor. Now, let's talk about the actual lawsuit itself. There will never be $46 million paid by anyone for any reason. The case will be appealed. It will ultimately be settled out of court. It will be settled by a multi-billion-dollar insurance company. That's what happens in basically every one of these cases. Now, the insurance company is going to be spreading propaganda and talking about all these gym owners going out of business. It's all utter and complete bullshit. It's complete nonsense. Now, let's back up just a little bit on the Henry. I think part of the thing that people have been real upset about is Henry Gracie serving as expert witness for the plaintiff, okay? And I think that's perfectly legitimate. I frankly have my questions about that too. But here's the question I want people to ask themselves: where was the expert witness on the other? Where were the lawyers on the other side? I mean, what were they doing? Did you not have a lawyer on the other side that knew something about jiu-jitsu that could tell the jury that some of this stuff that Henner was saying was nonsense? Why? I mean, what were they doing? Why didn't they hire an expert?
Like I mentioned before, my buddy Adolfo, he had that lawyer on. Come to find out, I think Clark Gracie was on the defense. I think Clark Gracie was representing the defense. So,
yeah. So what?
But Henner obviously has that polarizing personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. But like, what about the lawyers? So and I used to say this about the O.J. Simpson case. Do I think O.J. Simpson killed those people? 100%. I think he killed those people. Do I think it's the jury's fault that he got set free? Absolutely not. It was the prosecutors who did a horrible, horrible job. I mean, putting on that glove in front of the jury without seeing if it fit first, all these different mistakes. The reason O.J. Simpson got acquitted is because the prosecutors sucked. They were terrible. And these insurance companies, you know what they do? They've started bringing lawyers in-house instead of hiring lawyers to represent their policyholders. Do you know why they bring them in-house? Because they can pay them less. So what ends up happening is when you're going against me, like I'm suing some company, and the insurance company hires the shittiest, cheapest insurance defense lawyer, what the hell you think's going to happen? I mean, it's me, the black belt lawyer, going against some white belt lawyer. I'm going to beat him every single time. But this all gets back to follow the money, right? I mean, that's pretty good advice in life. If you want to know what's driving something, trace the money back. And when you trace this lawsuit back to the source, every single path leads to an insurance company not doing what it's supposed to do.
So how can we have a lot of academy owners out there that listen to this podcast? A lot of them actually are junior belts too. Like I know of a couple in Thailand that are blue belts, and they have their own academy out there. What advice would you give them to kind of bulletproof their academy from a situation like this?
Yeah, so great question. And it's very dependent. The law, at least in the United States, the laws are different state by state. So Texas may have a different law than California, which may have a different law than New York, which may have a different law than Florida. I practice in all 50 states. So I'm kind of familiar with a lot of the laws as it relates to this stuff in all 50 states. And as long as, let's just take Texas, for example. As long as you purchase insurance from a reputable insurance company. In other words, if you're a gym owner, don't go, what's the cheapest insurance I can buy, right? Which is what a lot of us do. Like you look at these car insurance commercials, we're the cheapest. And I'm like, well, shit, I ain't buying you. You suck. I'm going to buy something that's actually worth spending money on. So buy good insurance from good insurance companies. Make sure that your students sign the appropriate release forms, just like any sport. You go skiing, you go scuba diving, you go do jiu-jitsu, you're going to sign these release forms. And don't be a dumbass. Don't do stupid things. Like, don't do obvious stupid things. I mean, if you're a black belt and a new white belt comes in and wraps his legs around you and you stand up and you slam him as hard as you can on the mat, that's completely inappropriate. And if you do that and hurt the person, you should be responsible, right? Because that's being an idiot. But as long as you are, and I'll tell you the other thing that a lot of gyms do now, which I think is a good idea, is make sure you videotape, have cameras in the gym.
Yeah.
So you have a record of what actually happened, because if you don't have a camera, somebody could say basically whatever they wanted to, and you don't have any proof to say that they're wrong. So like we have cameras in our gym, so we know everything that's going on, and I think that's really a good thing. But the thing is, when you walk into a sport like jiu-jitsu, the law says you are accepting some risk.
I was just about to say, there's some risk like we have to assume.
For sure. It's like if you're – so – and this is kind of the way I like to think. If you're skiing and you're just going down the ski slope, boom, 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 and then something happens and you break your knee, you cannot sue the ski resort, okay? If you try to, not only will you lose, you'll end up paying the ski resort's attorney fees. That would be a completely frivolous case, okay? On the other hand, if you're going down the ski slope and there's a massive hole that somebody's dug, and there's no markings around it, and they don't warn you, and you go into that hole and you get hurt, then they're going to be responsible, because that's completely unreasonable. It's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. If you go into a jiu-jitsu class and you get, ligament torn, or your knee hurt, or, black eye or whatever, well, so fucking what? That's part of jiu-jitsu. That's part of the risk you accept. But if you go into a jiu-jitsu and some guy takes his finger and shoves it into your eyeball, that's you know what I mean? That's like not jiu-jitsu. So
Yeah.
it's really the line between what is normal and what is reasonable and acceptable and what isn't. And most people, when they look at a situation, they can tell the difference. My understanding of the particular move that was done in the $46 million case was a back take that involved a certain position where if the guy's back you were taking doesn't duck his head, he can kind of get his neck hyperextended. But I also heard that the guy was a very experienced wrestler or something like that. And so, again, all these facts are really important. The only people, by the way, everybody's got all these opinions about this case. The only people that really know what happened are the 12 jurors that made the decision. So they heard all the evidence, and something about it, I don't know, maybe that insurance company made them mad or something.
Yeah, definitely in the times we are now, the only thing I worry about is, the slippery slope. We talk about it in business school, this, or like when it comes to like the Constitution or law or stuff like that, like the slippery slope. How much do we allow before it starts to get out of control? And, people see a $46 million case, and they're like, well, I don't want 46, but I'll take 2. I'll take 800 grand. You know what I mean? Like, hey, man, you want to go ahead and come in and act like we don't know each other, and then, you break my leg because of whatever, and then we can split or something like that. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's people like that in jiu-jitsu, but $46 million opens a lot of people's eyes.
No doubt.
You know what I mean?
No doubt about that. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And what I'm here to tell you is, and again, follow the money. Every time you hear about jiu-jitsu or otherwise, every time you hear about a big verdict, nobody gets paid that money, ever, okay? Oh, $100 million verdict. Well, that must mean somebody just got $100 million. No. Here's what happens. Afterwards, the case is appealed. It sits around for 2 hours on some appellate judge's desk. And if you're in Texas, the judge overturns it because all the appellate judges in Texas were appointed by Republican governors who were paid by insurance companies. So that's their constituents. And so they appoint judges that are favorable for insurance companies. That's how it works. So none of those judgments ever get paid, but the insurance companies want people to think they get paid because then they can pass laws that screw everybody and make the insurance companies better off. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've gotten from guys that'll be like, hey, this and this happened to me and I'd like to sue. And I'd be like, well, the insurance companies say you can't do that, so sorry, you're out of luck. What? Yeah, all those politicians you voted for that you talk about, they're the ones that are taking away your rights. What? I didn't know that. All those frivolous lawsuits? Yeah, all those lawsuits are frivolous. Well, they think yours is frivolous too. No, mine is the only one that's not frivolous. Like, that's what I hear all the time. There's way too many lawsuits. Everybody's lawsuit's frivolous except mine. Mine is legit. Mine is the only legitimate one. So, anyway, it is a slippery slope, and it attracts a lot of attention, but it's not what it appears to be. I'll put it that way.
Well, that's good to know because, man, I saw that. And, I think to touch on the Henner side of it, I think my issue with the whole Henner thing isn't necessarily him being an expert witness or saying, the standard of care of jiu-jitsu, this arbitrary thing that he just kind of came up with and whatnot. My whole thing was, I follow him on social media, and I felt like everything that came along with him talking about it was a billboard for Gracie University. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, oh, man, this black belt was careless. At Gracie University, we don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, that to me was kind of, I was like, come on, man. Like, granted, if you want to charge $100,000 for your testimony, by all means. That doesn't even bother me. And get after it. Obviously, you have years of experience that a lot of people don't. You've rolled with, hundreds of thousands of people. You know what I mean? But I felt like it was kind of like a distasteful, in my opinion, on doing that at the end of it. Instead of just saying, "Hey, these were the facts. This is this is what happened. If you guys have any questions, let me know." You know what I mean? Instead of like it was like an infomercial for why Gracie University is better than all these other boo-boo schools out there that hurt people. You know what I mean?
It just doesn't. It doesn't strike. I agree with you on that. It doesn't. It kind of strikes me the wrong way too. And I actually. And again, I'm not a black belt. I'm a purple belt. So take this for what it's worth. But I just think he's wrong about a lot of the things he said. Like, it's not the way we do things at my gym. I think it's separating higher belts and lower belts is a bad idea. I think it should be I think the more you get to roll with higher belts, the better and safer you are. I feel so much safer rolling with a black belt than I do with a big new white belt. Like, way, way safer.
Agreed.
And I still roll with new white belts. I have a friend who's my age, who's a brown belt, really good. He says he loves rolling with black belts and he loves rolling with new white belts. He said the black belts, my jiu-jitsu gets better, and the white belt show me I can win a street fight, basically. So, I've been going over this River Oaks gym, and there's new white belts in there a lot now. And I roll with them, but I roll with them just to remind myself what a street fight it was like, And then after one or two, and I'm always literally during the rolls, I'm like, slow down, relax. Because I was the same way. I was hyper. I was trying to, move fast when I started out and, burning too much energy. And I wish somebody would have been like, slow down, take a breath, calm down. And then after I'm done, I go roll with a purple belt or a brown belt or a black belt and actually work on getting better at jiu-jitsu. So,
right.
So I just think he's wrong about that. And I think that approach is not the approach that a lot of gyms use, nor should they use. And again, my opinion is, as a purple belt, is worthless, but that's my opinion. So that was really, in addition, like you're saying, it kind of looks bad. I just don't agree with his philosophy. I'm sorry. I think the philosophy that you and I train under is a better philosophy. I just do. So
I honestly think he's in the minority of the jiu-jitsu community with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, me too.
Because I like you mentioned, even as a white belt, I loved rolling. I still do, and love rolling with higher belts. I enjoy the experience of someone showing me, what the possibilities are. Like you mentioned earlier, there's levels to it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think if that white belt in this situation was honestly worried about rolling with the black belt world champ, then I think he would have just said no. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't. Yeah. I think there's also a little bit of ego going on there and whatnot, and competitiveness. But I don't know. It's like one of those. It's just one of those situations where no matter what happens in it, no one's going to be happy. You know what I mean? Like. Agreed. No one's going to be happy whether it was Henner or someone else. There's always going to be backlash. And, people talking about, like sold out the community for money and whatnot. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think he just has a point of view that I would say 75% of the community doesn't share. You know what I mean? So,
and I would say, by the way, anybody that says he sold himself out, sold the community out is full of it. Okay. He's got plenty of money. $100,000 does not change his lifestyle at all. Yeah. I don't think he was doing it for money. He doesn't need that money. I just think he was wrong. like you're saying, I would have loved to have been the lawyer cross-examining him, because I would have asked him a lot of questions about some of his philosophy, because maybe it works for him and maybe it works for his students and what he does. I don't want to criticize it as far as that goes, but it's not the way we do it, at least in my experience, in a lot of gyms. We just don't do it that way. So that's really, look, if they had paid him $2 or $3 million, that's a sellout.
Yeah.
$100,000 check for Henry Gracie doesn't change his lifestyle at all. So.
Completely agree. So, hey, but Brian, we like to end every show with one question. If you could give one piece of advice to a brand new white belt starting off in jiu-jitsu, what would it be?
Slow down. I would say relax and slow down. And that is very, very hard to do, especially when you first start out and you have no idea where to put your body, what to do. You're nervous, you're getting choked all the time. But it's the quicker you realize that at least when you're in the gym, that you're not fighting, you're doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
The quicker you realize that, the quicker your jiu-jitsu gets better. The analogy that I've been thinking about a lot is, can you imagine somebody that goes to CrossFit and literally does the full max workout at full speed every single time, or somebody that goes and lift weights and every single time they lift weights, they max out on the bench? That would be preposterous. It would be so stupid, and everybody would think it's stupid, and they would get hurt. What's the difference between going 110% every single time you do jiu-jitsu? It's just not smart. Nobody, it's just athletes don't do that. Like,
Yeah.
you're supposed to be in there getting better at the skill. And so I would just say slow down, relax. Don't look at it as a fight. Look at it as jiu-jitsu. You're trying to get better at jiu-jitsu.
Awesome, man. I completely agree with that. And thinking of it as jiu-jitsu, I think, is an extremely underrated mindset, especially when first starting, because I definitely thought I was fighting for my life every single time.
Me too.
So, but hey, Brian, if people want to follow you or get in contact with you, what's the best way that they can do it?
Law firm is vbattorneys.com. That's V as in Victor, B as in Brian, vbattorneys.com. My personal website, where I have my own podcast on leadership, is brianbeckham.org, and that's BECKCOM, BECKCOM, kind of an unusual spelling. So I'm on all the social medias, YouTube, all that stuff, but probably I'm most active on Instagram, which I think is where most jiu-jitsu people are, at least nowadays, and it's Brian Beckham Lawyer on Instagram. So come follow me, man. I have a lot of jiu-jitsu comments. I have a lot of law comments. Anybody has any questions about any legal stuff that we touched on or anything like that, like I said, we fight for fighters. I am really, really privileged to be able to give something back to the jiu-jitsu community. So anybody has any questions at all, feel free to call me. I'll do my best to answer them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brian, for coming on the show today. The time flew by. This was an epic conversation, lots of laughs, a lot of good times. So I'm super excited for people to listen to this at home. Let us know what you guys think at home. Comment down below on Spotify. Now you can leave a comment on every single Spotify episode if you guys want. Hit us a DM and let us know what you guys think about this episode. And thank you guys so much for listening and watching at home, and we'll catch you later. Peace. Oh, and no oil checks here.